welcome back to another episode of The Road to Retirement. I'm your host, Zach Padden, and I'm here with my gracious co host, Tony Shore, who has a lot of jokes this morning already to start his day. He said he got his full 8 hours of sleep, he's got his Starbucks coffee, and he's ready to go today. Tony, thanks for joining us.
I am so ready. It hurts, Zach. I did. I got the full 8. I had a free coffee coming this morning, so I'm hyped up on coffee. When I know I'm doing a show with you first thing in the morning, Zach, I usually get up really early and drink 30 to 40 cups of coffee just to prepare. I did get the full 8 hours of sleep, so I am excited about the show today. I'm pumped up. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about. We'll try not to be all Debbie Downer today, right?
Yeah.
It's been a rough week in the stock market, but these things happen. How have you been, though? First, are you guys still busy? I mean, I know it's still you're in the thick of the tax season, right?
Yeah, we're still about a month out to the end of tax season. So right now our office is all hands on deck, full go, trying to get everybody through, get their taxes done, and
Sure.
keep being efficient, because just because we're doing tax season doesn't mean our financial services business slows down or the law.
Sure.
So we try to keep everybody moving, and it's a grind and it's a process this time of year, but it's good to see people coming in the door and putting names to faces and getting more face-to-face interaction with our clients.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think that's fantastic. But Zach, let's jump into it. What our listeners and viewers want to hear about this week, and maybe have questions about is, I mean, obviously, and we've touched on it in the past few shows, but the tariff situation, how it's affecting the economy, what's going on with the stock market. Should people be panicked? I know that I've been getting questions from my friends and family because they know, you're friends with those guys at Brookside. They know what they're doing. The financial gurus over there. What do they say? What's going on? Should I move to cash? Do I need to do something? What do I do to plan for the future? Things are rapidly changing. And that's what we're talking about, right? Changes.
Yeah. And I think one of the big things people get nervous about is they look at the numbers every day and they see it goes up and down.
Right.
If it only went up, it wouldn't be a market. The
No, you'd
prices are
never be
going.
able to buy. You'd always be buying when it was high, if it always went up. And so, if you're dollar cost averaging your way in, which most workers, people when they're working, not for our retired listeners, but if you're still at work, a market correction is the greatest thing. Like I think it was the Oracle of Omaha himself, Warren Buffett, said, "I love market corrections. Gives us a chance to buy."
Yeah, I mean, if the market's always going up, it's not going to be great for us. The market has to come down at times, and we were due for a market correction.
Yes.
And there is a lot of uncertainty in today's market, we'll say. That's how we're going to word it. It's the
Yeah,
politically
with the
correct way to
tariffs,
say it.
I think that there's uncertainty with what the tariffs. One day they're on, one day they're off. So I think it's that uncertainty. But I think after a week like we've had, a lot of people are like,
Hallelujah! Where's the Tylenol?
a little
Yeah.
stressed, right?
Yeah, I mean, the bad thing is every news site says different things. The media is going to give you different views on things. The big thing is, we've talked about it before when the election was going on, the market likes to know what's going on. And
Right.
with this right now, we have no idea what's going to happen with some of these tariffs until we get more information. So the market volatility is there because we're uncertain of some of these things.
Sure.
So hopefully it's going to balance out. It should. The market always does. But our big concern right now is just staying the course. You should be
Right.
looking at your plan and making sure that it's still going to achieve your goals. If you want to retire tomorrow, you may want to go a little more conservative. If you're younger, this is the time where you can get a little riskier. You can go more into the market because you have time if it does go down a little bit to rebuild. But if you're telling me you're retiring tomorrow, let's get you in something a little bit safer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I talked with Michael Binger, the president of Gradient Investments, this week earlier, and he was talking on a show, and I heard him, and I got to ask him a couple questions as well about what's going on, and he said, the underlying U.S. economy is still strong. I mean, U.S. companies are strong. The stock market is companies. And so you can't look at all the noise in the media or the things that might be temporary, like a temporary drop because, oh, we're doing this tariff or that tariff. What's happened is it levels out. I mean, Trump levied tariffs on China in his first term, quite a few, and Biden kept them in. Even I think even proposed to raise them on China, and then the markets, after that, they had one bad year in there, and then the last couple of years they've been, we've had two of the best years in the market ever. It's been way up. So it was due for a correction, but these things are temporary, right? I mean, but you do have to be properly allocated. You're right. And that's part of planning for the future, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things is some people try to do it all on their own and they invest themselves and it works for some people. I'm not going to say there aren't people who have been very successful doing that, but I don't do it myself. I use our trusted advisors here.
Sure.
I use advisors. I listen to people around me. I don't just make decisions myself.
Well, if you make decisions yourself, and for those DIYers out there or do-it-yourself people when it comes to investing, more often than not, they let their emotions get the best of them because every study shows and all the facts show that people, especially when they do it themselves, they end up selling low and buying high in a lot of cases if they're trying to time the market or do it themselves because they get carried away with emotions. They're watching it too closely. They're not having a team of professionals allocate for them, right?
Yeah, and that's what you really want. You want to see these people who are viewing the markets, they understand what's going on. That's their job. You want the person who's going to give you the right answers and the person that you trust to make good decisions for you. And they're going to look at your risk because some people are riskier than others. Some people have a low risk tolerance, and you can get a good investment for everybody's views.
There you go. I think that's great. So, what else do you want to talk about today? I know you wanted to title the show "Things Change, Plans Should Too." What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so as life progresses, everything you're doing should change. Like we talked about the financial plans. The older you get and the closer to retirement you get, you're going to want to get a little safer. But with your estate planning, which is kind of more what I do at our company, you're going to want to adjust your plan based on your kid's age, your age, what's your goals at that point. If you're worried about nursing homes, your plan should be a lot different than the person who's just having their first kid. Because over time, these plans are going to develop, you're going to have different concerns. And that's one of the big things that a lot of people don't realize is a will from 40 years ago could still be valid, but it could give you completely different outcomes than what you want today.
Yeah, things change. Your life changes. There are major life changes. There are weddings. There are divorces. There are deaths. There are births. There are a lot of moving parts, and laws change. So you can't just have the same. My parents did that they had a will and powers of attorney in place, and they were so outdated. And I said, Mom and Dad, my mom went into full-time care. I go, well, you're still with it and alert. We're going to all go down and see the estate planning attorney, and we're going to get new documents and updated documents drawn up. So, what you want to have happen happens, right? So, and I feel so much better about that we got that taken care of.
Yeah, and that's one thing people forget too is, oh, I did it before. It's fine. They don't look at it saying like, oh, that person's passed away.
Hmm.
I don't want them to inherit my money anymore.
Right.
Things happen.
Yeah.
And people set up these old 401ks when they first start their job. Who knows who you put as your beneficiary?
Hmm.
I mean, how often, when's the last time you've checked a 401k's beneficiary that most of the time people don't? They
Nope.
leave them and all of a sudden their family has to deal with the repercussions because they didn't set something up right.
Yeah, you hear the horror stories on that one all the time of, there's the classic, and this happened and went all the way to the Supreme Court, as you know. The example I'm going to cite. The guy got married young, right out of high school sweetheart, but they only stayed together a year. They didn't know what they were doing. It didn't work out. Then A couple of years later, gets remarried, happily married for 25 years, has kids, loves his wife and kids. They're a happy family. Something happened. He passed away. Well, his wife thought, we're going to be set. We've got his, 401k or IRA and these things, these accounts, his insurance, all the things were under his first wife's name. He forgot to change the beneficiary. And they went to court, took it to court, and the Supreme Court said, no, a beneficiary designation takes precedent over the will, because he had an updated will, but he didn't update his 401ks or other accounts, the beneficiaries.
And a lot of people forget about doing that. They say, oh, well, I updated my will a couple of years ago. They don't understand that transfer on deaths, payable on deaths, beneficiaries trump the will. The will just tells the court what you want to have done. And a lot of people don't think about the repercussions of setting somebody as a joint owner or a beneficiary. They think that everything is just going to go how they want. And if you don't have the proper planning in place or don't update your plans accordingly, life's going to hit you quick.
But beneficiary designations are contractual, and they take precedent over a will.
Yep.
I don't always agree with that, but that's how it works, isn't it? As an
Yeah.
attorney, is that how it works? Am I right on that?
Yeah, so as long as you don't sign it under duress or Tony Shore's not sitting beside you holding a gun to you saying you're giving it all to me.
Well, I would
then
like anyone out there who doesn't know who to leave things to use the name Anthony Shore. I always encourage that.
Yeah, if somebody doesn't know, I tell them all the time, I know a guy who would be a great person to leave money to. But for the most part, those beneficiary designations are valid as long as you sign it correctly, you know the right stuff. Everything's fine. Most people come in and they know they want to leave it to their kids, but you want to make sure you're updating these regularly or at least reviewing them to make sure it's still the way you want it to go, because over time you forget about those things.
Yep.
You set it up one time, you put it away and forget it. And that should not be the case, which that's something that we've been pushing more for our clients to bring in their estate planning documents. Let's review them. Let's see if there's anything new out there that we need to update for you. Because once you see it out on paper, you forget, wow, I really don't want them in charge of something.
Right. So, as an attorney, do you encourage your clients to look at that and update it and make changes as needed?
Yeah, I usually recommend every couple years you come back in for a review. Some people want to do yearly. And it's really if you see any big life changes,
Sure.
that's when I want you to come back in. You should be pulling those documents out every year and at least looking through them and saying, okay, I still want them. I still want them. Okay, they need to be cut out. And that way, then you're keeping up to date on what your documents say.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, all of a sudden, it's going to be 10 years later and you realize that this is completely different than what you want. But if you're checking it yearly, you can kind of take little tweaks instead of having to reinvent the whole wheel.
Right. And what I want to ask you about, and I think, we've briefly touched on this in other shows about estate planning and the importance of it or powers of attorney, but individual circumstances can dictate different things. Like my grandfather leaving a farm. If you own a farm or a small business, there are things that you are going to want to have in place, or your specific situation. You might have 3 kids, one of which is a terror, and I always say I have 3 kids, and I always tell people, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? I mean, 2 of my kids, great, turned out great. But sometimes there's the black sheep. I'm teasing, of course. I love all my kids, but and they're all in the will. But sometimes you have that person who you don't want them to receive, if they received a third of, once the house is sold and the life insurance and everything's split up, if they got that money, it would cause problems. Maybe they have an addiction issue. Maybe they have a bad relationship that they're in, or they got married to somebody who's trying to take them for a ride. And, there are all sorts of circumstances that can happen. Life happens, right? To the best of us. So you have to look at their situations and say, who do you want this to go to? And you don't make these decisions, but sometimes people tell you these things, and there are specific things you can get in the weeds, but that's what you're here for, right?
Yeah, and honestly, you touched on a perfect point there. We ask clients, "Are you okay with your child getting this much money or your beneficiary?" And we throw kind of a ballpark number out there based on their assets. And then you see their eyes get real wide. They may say, "No, I can't." They cannot handle that. And then that
Right.
tells us, okay, we need to look at other avenues such as trusts so that they don't get this money all in one lump sum because we don't want them to have the financial burden or we don't want them to blow all this money in
Yeah.
the first year when this should be a life-changing event for them.
Yeah.
We don't
Well,
want an 18-year-old to inherit $1 million going off to college. They're going to have a lot of fun for 4 years or more, but
Well,
that money will be gone.
as long as they stay alive and the money until they either end up killing themselves or the money's gone, one of the two. And I hate to make light of it, but we've seen it so many times with movie stars, professional athletes when they hit it big and they get all this money, or musicians, especially pro athletes. They get, millions of dollars and they're 19 years old or 20 years old or 21 years old, however old. If you gave me $1 million when I was 21, I always tell people this, no way I could have handled that when I was 21. Now you, Zach, you're a professional. You've always been like that. I imagine when Chris Anselmo was 10, you could have given him $1 million and he probably would have turned it into $10 million, right? So some people are unique, but the majority of us, at least I can only speak for myself, I would have been ruined by that. No way I could have handled that.
No,
I would have blown it. The simple answer is, of course, I would blow the money. I would have the most expensive stereo system money could buy, right? First of all, and then from there it would just go downhill. But or be dead in a ditch somewhere, right? I mean, people just can't handle the influx of money, and we've seen it over and over again. So why put your family, if you really love somebody, you're not going to do that to them. If you love your kids, you're going to set up a trust and you're going to have it done fairly and make sure it's done right.
yeah, and that's where a lot of people don't realize, even when your kids are young, before they turn 18, setting up a trust is a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Because if something happens to you and your spouse, that money's in a pot for your kids. It's not governed by the court, it's governed by the trustees. So putting the right people in the right places, I know it's harping back on other episodes we've done, but having the right people in these roles for you is so important. And the
Yeah.
one thing that you did harp on too is professional athletes and people who are movie stars, we see them go broke day after day because they got this lifestyle they get used to from this big influx of money, and that money doesn't continue to come in. This is a one-time payout usually for these
Right.
people,
Right.
and they start spending it, and they're used to then being able to give their friends money. And all of a sudden, there's no money left, and they don't know what to do because they've never had to work for it.
Yeah.
So setting this money up to give them long-term success is way better than a lump sum.
It is. I actually did radio promotions for a small record label called Frontline Records in Southern California back in the late 80s and early 90s. And they had an artist named John Gibson, and he had a young guy that he was friends with come in and do a rap on one of his songs. And that kid went by MC Hammer, and it was the greatest story because I wasn't working for the label at the time. I started after this happened. I wish I'd been there. I wish I could say I was there when MC Hammer came in and recorded. But MC Hammer came in to my boss Mike McLean's office, who was the A&R guy there, and gave him a cassette tape. Back then the demos were on cassette. This is how old I know, I'm dating myself. But MC Hammer gave him a cassette, and Mike sat there and listened to it with him, and he pushed it back and he said, because MC Hammer said, sign me to your label, which actually would have been the worst thing for MC Hammer to have happened at the time because the label didn't have the money to promote it and probably would have just died a slow death, the record. But who knows what would have happened. But Mike said, rap's a fad. It's not going to catch on. And Mike tells that story. He loves that story, how he turned down MC Hammer. But MC Hammer, a year later, moved to, I think, San Francisco area, where that's where he's from, and got signed to a major label. I forget which label he was on. Capital or MCA, but he got signed and he made it huge, as you know. He sold 10 million records, right? And he had an entourage of like 50 people, and he would pay. He was generous. He paid everybody all this money, built a mansion, had a Rolls Royce with gold plated trim. I mean, he did it up. And he went bankrupt, and MC Hammer had to sell all that stuff and was almost penniless at one point after that. So it just goes to show, he was young, couldn't handle it, but I thought that was a fun story. My buddy turned down MC Hammer. Told
Well,
him rap was just a fad. I think Kendrick Lamar would beg to differ, along with a lot of other people. So yeah, I thought that was funny, but MC Hammer didn't handle it. Now he eventually got back on his feet, things like that, but he really he just he just gave away money, and people kept hitting him up for money. Family comes out of the woodwork. Prince, I live in Minneapolis, Prince had the same problem with, and then when he died, it's like all of a sudden there's 30 cousins that said Prince promised them things.
mhm. Have you ever heard the Shaquille O'Neal quote where he said to his kids, "I'm rich, you're not"?
Oh, I
And
love that.
it's
Yes.
so true. I mean,
Yeah.
he's trying to get them to understand
They have
they
to
need to
work
be able to
for it.
make their own money. They can't
Yes.
just live off his money, which that's a great lesson for his kids because, yeah, they could get a ton of money from him when he passes away,
Right.
live off that and have no problems.
Yeah.
But he
Warren
wants
Buffett
them.
too. Warren Buffett's kids. He's one of the richest men in the world. He doesn't. Nope.
Yeah, he
They,
said most of his is going to what, charity, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't give it. He's not leaving his kids any of his money, because he said it'll ruin them. They need to make it on their own. I made it on my own. They can make it on their own. Wouldn't it be terrible to be Warren Buffett's kids and then not have it to be up it's like, but Dad.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, those are good life lessons, though, right? I mean, we use these examples, but I think the key here is you need a good estate planning attorney. And people, they hear the word estate planning attorney, they think, I'm not rich, I can't afford an estate plan. That's crazy, because an estate plan is actually relatively cheap, especially compared to the money it's going to save you down the road, and the time and money it's going to save your family.
Yeah, when we discuss like estate planning tools with people, I usually say, here's what it's going to cost if you don't do this for your family. Here's what it costs you to do it today. And puts kind of like the cards on the table there. You're saving your family money by doing a transfer on death deed or setting up a trust to help avoid probate. If you're setting up for nursing home care, here's what you're saving per month for a nursing home cost by doing this one-time fee.
Yeah.
So once you kind of put the dollars and cents out there, what people are saving by doing something, it really changes their view on some of these tools. And the thing is, we offer a free consult to come in and discuss this.
Yeah, people think to talk to you, Zach. I mean, you are an experienced and great estate planning attorney. People need you. They need somebody like you. In fact, they need you personally, Zach Padden. That's who they need. And so I'm encouraging our listeners to call, but they think, oh, he's going to charge me $200 an hour. So one question's going to cost me more than, and that's just not the way you operate, is it?
Yeah, no, we don't bill hourly for estate planning. It's a
Yeah.
flat fee. What you see is what you get. If you call my phone right here, right now, with a question about it, you're not getting a bill for it. We're here to answer your questions and get you the right plan in place for yourself and your family, because that's the most important thing, is setting up your family for success in the next generation.
That's awesome. So make sure that you understand things change. Make sure your plan is changing, but make sure you're working with a financial advisor and an estate planning attorney, and you'll save so much money and time and headache in the long run. So, how can our listeners do that? How can they get a hold of you, Zach?
So for the estate planning side, you can give us a call at 216-485-1040 or visit our website, anselmolaw.com. Or if you're worried more about the financial side, you can call us at Brookside Tax at 440-886-3550 or our website, brooksidetax.com. You can schedule on our Calendly links on the website.
All right. Well, that sounds great, Zach. Anything else before we go?
It's another great week here in Ohio. It's finally above 50 degrees, so let's
Woohoo!
hope that winter is behind us.
Yes. Let's hope spring is here to stay. All right. Well, hey, that does it for another episode of The Road to Retirement with our host, Zach Padden.